Snow is so beautiful, but it's kind of tough to paint. Today we're going to learn together. It's been snowing in my area and it made me want to paint snow, so I sketched out a few scenes and got to work for about 40 minutes or so. Some of these turned out great, while others were a learning experience. But either way, I learned a ton through the process, which is what it's all about, right? So in this video, I'm going to share with you some tips on how to paint snow. And don't worry if you don't use watercolor paints, because these will apply to you too. And if you aren't into snow, don't worry. These tips will really be great for anything you decide to paint. But before we get started, I wanted to let you know that I've made more painting tip videos that are on the way, and you won't want to miss them, so please consider subscribing. Alright, let's get started. First, snow isn't white. Now, don't get me wrong, snow is usually known for its stark, bright white color because that's what its local color is, but in reality, it's so much more because it's white. When light hits an object, it ends up taking the color of the light. Let me show you an example of this. Here is a white sheet of paper lit by a white light, as well as a few other colored objects on top of it for comparison. Now I'm going to change the color of the light, and watch what happens. Look at how the paper changes colors. Now this is highly exaggerated from what we actually see in life, but it shows how white objects end up inheriting the color of light, and we end up using other contextual clues to know that something is white. And because that's how the color white works, you get a lot of flexibility when it comes to painting snow. So as we're painting snow, I want us to think about us actually really painting the light of a scene. So in a dusk or dawn scene, you're going to be adding more yellow and oranges to the lighter portions of the snow. During the midday, you may end up keeping the snow white altogether, especially with watercolor, because you're holding up those whites. And if there's other light in a scene, like a warm lamp light or Christmas lights, you'll want to paint that color into the snow as well. And a similar thing also actually happens in the shadows, but instead of taking on the color of the light, shadows usually inherit the color of the atmosphere, the weaker, the secondary light. And usually that secondary light is the blue sky. And actually, if you look at life a lot of times outside, shadows are usually cooler. In these paintings, I use the blue shadow color, but you can also just use a more neutral shadow color if you don't like the blue. I think the blue adds a lot of character and personality though. So just remember, white snow isn't just white. It's full of a bunch of different colors, and you get to play around with that. You can be really expressive and creative. The way we know that snow is white is because some other things like contextual clues and something that we'll get to towards the end of the video, but don't be afraid to add color to your snow. It will add so much to it. Alright, here's the second tip. Snow isn't flat, so paint the form. This is really true of anything. When we paint, we're painting on two-dimensional surfaces, so we have to use anything we can to create the illusion of three-dimensional scenes. And this can be really helpful when painting snow scenes, especially if you keep it white. Even though snow can sometimes look like a giant flat plane when we look out our window, a closer inspection reveals that it follows the form of what it is laying on top of. Sometimes wind causes snow to pile up on as well, and then it creates little hills. So if you want snow to look more realistic, be sure to use shadows to show the form of snow. One effective trick to make this really work is to use the shadows from other objects. For example, in this painting, the shadow of the tree doesn't go straight, but it follows the slope downward. And in this painting, most of the scene is in a shadow layer contrasted with the bright sunrise, but to give proper form, I added darker shadows inside of that shadow form, and it worked pretty well. Now, before I show you the last tip, if you've made it this far, please like the video. Thanks so much. Alright, here is the third and final tip. Values are everything. A lot of painting beginners like to focus on the color. They think that's where the life is. But trust me, values are easily the most important part of a painting. If you have the darks in the right spots and the lights in the right spots, your painting subject will look perfect no matter what the colors are. But if those values are off even a little bit, you start to lose everything. And when it comes to snow, you gotta remember that snow is extremely reflective. So where the sun hits the snow will usually be the brightest parts of a scene. Brighter than the houses, brighter than the sky. Look at this photo, for example. And real quick, notice the bluish shadows and how they follow the slope of the snow. Now to only see the values, let's get rid of all the color and change this photo to grayscale. Now I'm going to color select from the sky and snow and see what happens. Alright, are you ready? Look at that. Even though we think the sky is really bright when we look outside, the snow here is way brighter, and this is usually the case. Now there are some exceptions. For example, on an overcast day where the sun isn't out, you might find that the sky is similar in value or even brighter than the snow. And on extremely sunny days, other white objects, such as houses, they might be just as bright, if not brighter than the snow scenes. The point here is that values are everything in a painting, even in a snow scene. And when you don't get the values right, things will look off. like in this painting. It doesn't look right, not because of the color, but because the blue shadows are just slightly too dark compared to the rest of the scene. I would need to either darken everything else or lighten up the shadows. In watercolor, you can create lighter colors on the first pass by just diluting them with more water to make it lighter. But in your paintings, if you nail your values, your scenes will start to look perfect, no matter the colors you use. And that's extremely important with snow scenes. And I think I show that off pretty well in these other two paintings. I hope these tips help you paint snow scenes the best you can. And if you want to see how to use the coolest watercolor technique ever, check out this video.